So welcome to Polari Live Online. My name is Paul Burston. I've been running Polari events since 2007. Polari is a live showcase for LGBTQ+ writers, usually based at London South Bank Centre, hence my lovely backdrop. Tonight, I'm joined by three writers whose work explores questions of love, hope, identity, and belonging. Nikita Gill is a poet and writer. She has published 7 volumes of poetry and has been described as one of the most exciting young writers working today. Her latest book is called Where Hope Comes From, and heaven knows we need that right now. Musa Okwonga is the author of several fiction and non-fiction books, including Striking Out, In the End It Was All About Love, and One of Them. He lives in Berlin, where outsiders feel at home. And finally, Elizabeth Chakrabarty is the debut author of Lessons in Love and Other Crimes, which is a hybrid work of fiction and non-fiction and deals with the impact of hate crime. Welcome, Elizabeth. Can you tell us a little bit about your book and what inspired it, please?
My book was inspired by experiencing serious race hate crime over a number of years in the workplace. And I knew I had to write something about this. And it took me some time to work out how I might write it, but definitely it needed to be through fiction. But as you said, a hybrid book within its heart, a novel about race hate crime. It is a hybrid work. So I've constructed it with 2 opening essays. They're what we might call critical race memoir. They explore racism that I experienced from a very, very young age. And they build to the point autobiographically where I decided I wanted to write fiction about this particular race hate crime. So I'm going to read the end of these essays and the beginning of the novel. So instead of dredging up all the memories that make me anxious even now, I could use only the specifics of the race crime I experienced, explore the theme of racist crime in a genre fiction way, have a detective or a character eventually finding out who's behind it, and perhaps even get the perpetrator arrested. Then I could use the theme of love, despite hate, to counter the crime plot, a relationship keeping the protagonist going despite what's happening in her workplace. The ethnic minority characters will be in the foreground, the victim, people who care about her and that she cares about too, like a best friend, a parent figure, and perhaps siblings, and the love interest. Or will the love interest be white, like the majority of people she comes into contact with in her professional life? Yes, a white love interest would complicate the racial dynamics, not to do to white characters what white writers do to ethnic minority characters. The other white characters would be a faceless aggressor, colleagues, and a character blurring the themes of love and hate. Perhaps a seemingly helpful white savior figure, a well-meaning manager, plus other minor white characters encountered in a professional setting. So, the main character won't be me, though she'll be a bit like me for what happens to fit the character. She'll be looking forward to a new job in academia, but she's not naive. She's experienced usual day-to-day racism. She just won't expect what's about to happen to her, the crime. Then there's the question of how it ends and whether there might be justice. Now, where to begin? A title, a chapter heading, and the opening. That's often a teaser of what's to come, implying where we'll get to once we know the victim and the aggressor, and that there will eventually be a body. But to begin, the title, something like Lessons in Love. Chapter 1, Love in the Dark. In the future, there is a body. She's looking at it now, even though she really doesn't want to. The thing is, it's not the body anyone would have imagined. Isn't it the least likely person? Author's note, and the antagonist. My antagonist knew me and my movements and what would really get to me. That's how it felt. Can I imagine about someone like that? Most places I've worked, men have been in the majority. If my fictional antagonist is a man, he's focused, not the type to leave his office door open, invite people in or chat as they pass. His door is shut. Alone, sitting surrounded by his books, he faces his screen, a mug of coffee in one hand, his other hand on the computer mouse. His desk, no family photos or thank you cards from former students, just him, focused on his screen. I imagine glimpsing him through the screen, not his face though, just the black corduroy of the jacket close up. He's half standing, close to the screen. Now there's an out of focus whiteness, his fingers clutching the camera, tilting it away from him. What's he doing? He's used to a virtual learning environment, rarely seen in the real world. He's concealed behind PowerPoints and podcasts. Having thousands of students globally, his overheads are low. A computer, the internet, one salary. He's popular with management, leaving him to get on with his work. Behind his closed door, he has time. No clocking in and out with 24-hour access. Academics aren't monitored, with freedom of expression enshrined in their contracts, unless they draw bad publicity to the institution. He'd be careful, using encryption for his other work, his research. But what would that be? Like one of his virtual students, I examine what I see through the screen, the blur of dark clothes as he moves aside, then the familiar academic background the camera is directed towards, well-ordered bookshelves, the arm of a black executive-style desk chair, and that blur of movement again, coming into frame, the jacket sleeve leaning down on the armrest, the only evidence of a human body hidden beneath the fabric. He notices this too. The sleeve is withdrawn from sight, leaving the image of an academic office, a wall of books lined up on white shelves. A red light flashing in the corner of the screen. He's recording. Text appears, typed across the center. Lesson 1, an introduction.
When you decided to write about this subject, was it cathartic or was it sort of re-traumatizing, or was it a mixture of both?
It was a mixture of both, actually. I mean, I think once, now it's a book, it's been an amazing kind of release because I feel like I've put it somewhere, and obviously I don't want to give away what happens, in the book, but I've produced something that is a record, albeit fictional, although the race hate crimes that I describe in the book are specifically what happened to me. I mean, obviously some of them. Just some of them. I didn't write about all of them. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think during the writing and even during the editing and the rewrites in the past year during the pandemic, it's been quite traumatizing to come across it again, even in my own writing, to think, oh God, how does this happen? What we go through,
One of the advantages perhaps that creative people have is that we're able to turn those experiences into pieces of art, whether it's via painting or writing or whatever it is that your medium is. I think there is something incredibly therapeutic about being able to turn something awful into something beautiful.
I agree. I mean to write about this subject of racism for me has been cathartic in that sense of recording and finding a way in fiction and in autobiographical writing, a mixture of the two, to actually say, this is how it feels, this is how it impacts on your life. But also, yeah, I agree, there's something about producing an artwork, a piece of art that is, that will go out into the world, is amazing. And yeah, I felt really fortunate that actually, I knew that I had to write about this. And I was very glad when, my agent found a publisher that wanted to take it on.
But let's go over to Berlin now and to Musa. I haven't seen you, Musa, since you read at South Bank. I think it was maybe six or even more years ago. I can't remember when it was.
Yeah, that's right. I don't even own those clothes anymore. I was like, oh my goodness, I have this like a blue sweater which I haven't seen in about 5 years. So yeah, I have a new wardrobe just for you,
How does life in Berlin compare to life in London?
I'm getting out about as much as I would in London.
Yeah.
I'm about 2 months further away from the vaccine. So yeah, I've gone back in time, I think. No, but Berlin is, joking aside, it's an incredible city. It's a very queer city. Even the straight guys here, like I've got straight friends who will happily go, straight male friends will happily go to a gay bar, a queer bar for a night out as their first choice drink. And in fact, it was really funny. A couple of my friend Sasha was so funny. He was like, oh, let's go to that bar again. And I was like, oh yeah, it's Mo Belufa. He goes, yeah, let's go there. Oh, it's a gay bar. He goes, yeah, I was there last Wednesday and the guys were checking me out. And he felt so flattered to be checked out, because this is the thing, men don't get checked out in a very flattering way. So to get male attention to him as a straight guy was like, that's just really nice. So going to this bar, and he was more excited than I was. And he's like, it was really adorable. He goes to this bar and these guys are like, oh my God, he's back. And he was like a kid. And I was like, that's Berlin. Berlin's just a lot more queer. I couldn't really imagine that. My close straight friends in London, it's still a bit more segregated, I have to say. Actually, just before I do a reading, I have to just say it's funny because friends come, they visit Berlin, they're like, oh, I'm coming to Berlin for a wild weekend. And I'm always like, how wild? Because there's there's wild and there's Berlin wild, and I'm not sure. And they're like, okay, we're just coming for a few drinks. It's like, okay, good, because we can do the other thing if you want. We can do that, but you have to be ready for that.
Now, what can you tell us about your latest book?
It's called One of Them, a memoir about my 5 years at English private school, Eton College, attended by David Cameron, Boris Johnson, and other Conservative politicians. A lot of people talk about Eton, and it's a school that's surrounded in mystery. And I think partly because a lot of people that went there either still benefit from it, or they're annoyed about upsetting people from that world, because if you say the wrong things about that school, then you kind of get cast out. Perhaps as a queer Black person, you're kind of on the fringes anyway. But yeah, I'll read a segment about what it was to actually go there, because a lot of people, the reason I wrote this book is because a lot of people criticize Eton. But if you criticize it without the information, then people that went to Eton just brush off and go, oh, that wasn't what it was like. But I thought, if I give people who are being critical an actual blueprint of what it was like, then that empowers them in their critiques that they have to make, because I think we can all agree it's a place that needs criticism. Yeah. So here are some short segments. I'll try and read them quickly. They're about the school, class, and race. The first one is called The Lads. There is a way some boys at Eton look at me that I have never seen before. When I annoy someone in my hometown, they make eye contact with me. The fury glistens in their gaze. But at Eton, if I confront one of the more arrogant students who dislikes me, there is a very particular stare they give me. It is a glazed expression, never fully focused, as if they are peering out into the yard at a distant and mildly irritating disturbance, a fox howling somewhere in the dark. Boys who look at me like this belong to a class that everyone refers to behind their backs as the lads, and they seem exempt from generally accepted codes of behaviour. The lads intrigue me from the moment I arrive at Eton. There seem to be between 15 and 20 of them in each year out of 250 students, and they are significantly more confident than everyone else. A handful of the lads have a level of self-assurance which, whenever I'm within their radius, greets me with the force of a stiff breeze. The key thing with the lads is that they are impervious to peer pressure and will apparently be as comfortable with having no friends at all as with having 200. The lads are fascinating because they seem to defy all social conventions. I have been told my entire life that it is important to get on with people in order to succeed, but these peers of mine often seem supremely disinterested in that. The lads have one thing in common. Many of those closest to them seem to spend much of their time complaining about them in private, but never say anything to the lads' faces, as if they are afraid of being cast out of Eton's golden enclosure. One of the lads is so hated that during a cricket practice, a stray ball hits him in the middle of the back. And when he is doubled over in pain, one teacher remarks to the other, "You wouldn't want that to happen to anyone, but if it hadn't happened to someone, it would be him." My school does not create the lads. They arrive there with the cores of their egos fully formed. But it frequently seems to end up rewarding them with some of the most senior positions in Eton's school body. The boy who is hit with the cricket ball does not go on to become notably nicer, but he does end up as a school prefect. The lads have long ago worked out or been told by their parents that what matters most is not being good-natured, but achieving high office. In a system such as Eton's, where the boys are raised to be deferential to those in authority, they know that if they merely gain prestige, then personal popularity will follow. The school's power structure is strange to me. The school prefects are not appointed by staff or elected via secret ballot by their own year, both of which systems would seem far more reasonable. Instead, they are chosen by the prefects in the year above. The result is that if a boy wishes to be socially prominent at school, there are only 20 people in the school whose approval he truly needs. I watch boys campaign for election as school prefects with a vigor that I will later see in the world of British politics, and I will realize that this is the kind of place where these politicians learned it, that this is what they mean by networking. Networking is the art of laughing a little longer and louder than necessary at the jokes of the person whose patronage you seek, of standing silently by their shoulders when they're making a nonsensical argument, of hanging around just in case they need an extra pint, or strategically making sure you are in the same place as them on holiday. It is the least dignified behavior I can imagine, but I will see boys at Eton carry it out with such ease that it appears to be genetic. I think a great deal about the English concept of fair play. The idea that there are some things that are simply not done. The older I get, the more I wonder how much that concept of fair play was created to keep people of a certain social class in their place. I look at the most confident boys in my year at Eton, and I realize that the greatest gift that has been bestowed upon them is that of shamelessness. Shamelessness is the superpower of a certain section of the English upper classes. While so many other people in England are hamstrung by the difference in social embarrassment they've been taught since birth, the upper classes calmly parade on through the streets and boardrooms to claim the spoils. They do not learn shamelessness at Eton, but Eton is where they perfect it.
That's excellent.
This thing about class is amazing. It's exactly that. And that's what the book is about. The book actually doesn't talk much about race. It's mostly class. Absolutely. It was like writing this book was traumatic to Elizabeth's point, but it was also this incredible thing of like, it was anthropology. It was like, well, how do I explain it? Do you know when memories are so perfectly preserved, it's like they've been kept in salt?
Yeah.
I read my old school reports and I began writing, and the memories were perfectly preserved.
Writing about this now, all these years later, how did you relate to your younger self?
Terrifying, because you're talking about, it's a memoir, so you're being honest about everything, the good stuff and the bad stuff, and judging yourself from the eyes of a 41-year-old judging a 13-year-old is horrifying, actually. And it's really painful, because it's not only painful in terms of the mistakes I made, and they weren't that bad. There was a couple, but they were, not proud of. But the worst thing was seeing how vulnerable it was. And the thing I'm proudest of, it sounds really ridiculous, the thing I'm proudest of is that I kept my political outlook and I didn't get seduced by the dogma, because, here's the thing, an overwhelming percentage of people that left that school are right-wing, hard right. The funny thing is, Paul, the amount of emails I've had from people from Eton already, like my best friend from school was like, oh my God, he wrote me an email so emotional that it reduced me to tears. I had to walk around my flat to like calm down. But overwhelmingly, the response has been from teachers at Eton. Like the first letter I got from a teacher of Eton, the head of Arabic studies, he was like, this has already had a huge impact. He said, 2 days after reading it, I read it in a single day, and 2 days after reading it, a colleague approached me in the street and was like, have you read that new book about Eton? And he was like, yeah, I have. And he goes, this is happening right now. I wanted to make them look in the damn mirror and be like, why have you said nothing? You guys can write open letters about a teacher being sacked for being a misogynist, open letters to Eton in the Daily Mail. And where's the open letter about Cameron and Johnson? Yeah. Where are those letters? No, it's all self-involved. Where are they? You're looking for black working class students, you know, advertising in the Sun, a paper that hates black people. What the hell are you playing at? What the hell are you playing at? And it's all in the book. But the thing is, the book doesn't mention names, as you can see, right? So it's an indictment. So they can read it and be like, oh, we can't think he's not talking about us. Who is he talking about? And the best about that book is it speaks to the guilty. If you're guilty, it will sting you. And if you're not, you're fine. But I want it to sting people, to be honest.
I'm going to go over to Nikita now. Nikita, I last saw you at Heaven.
Yes. Oh, that was such a magical night. It was such a magical night. Every aspect of it was perfect. Like, and I've kept that memory. Musa just said about preserving memories in salt, and that's been one of the memories that I've turned to during this year when I've been most upset. And I look back at that day and I'm just like, what a perfect night. What a perfect night. That's something to hold on for.
It was literally a few weeks before the shit hit the fan, wasn't it? It was the last really big event that I took part in. And then shortly after that, the world changed. How has it been for you this last year? How did you adjust?
It's a hard one when you're a writer. You kind of, you do your job in isolation anyway, right? So I think I haven't had the fact that I never had an office life really, that never existed really for me. What was amazing is that I made the big decision to move into my own place. And that's made such a difference because I used to live with like 5 housemates. And it's been really wonderful kind of living on my own and kind of having my own space to work. And yeah, it's been amazing, but it's also, there've been so many low points because I've missed my family dreadfully. I've missed seeing my friends. I feel very lucky that I have a lot of author friends and I've been reading a lot of amazing books, Musa's book being one of them. In the end, it was all about love was the first book I read when I moved into this house. And it settled me so much. Because here's the thing no one tells you, like when you move in your 30s or your 40s, everything hurts. Like everything hurts. Why does no one tell you that your bones literally feel like they're being crushed? And it carries on for days. No one tells you this. But yeah, it's been really interesting. And I wrote this book, Where Hope Comes From, at the beginning of lockdown. And it's the first book which has hit the Times bestseller list, which was amazing for me. So it's been a year of many highs and like emotionally many, many lows, and mental health wise many lows. But I'm so grateful to be here and to hear Elizabeth's amazing book and to hear Musa read from this book, which I've been dying to read. And I've been seeing all my friends have got copies and like advanced copies. And I'm just like, no, I want to read this book. I'm so jealous. But yeah, it's amazing to be here. So thank you for having me.
Back to your book now. So it's called Where Hope Comes From. Is it fair to say that there's a kind of resilience and an optimism there?
Absolutely. I do start out the book talking about despair because I'm a big believer in the fact that you have to feel all of your feelings to get to the point where you can make room for hope and joy. And I think it's something that we all know as marginalized people in general, that hope is a thing of action. Hope is a thing that is grown, because there's always work to be done. And we definitely know this as activists. There's always work to be done. It's something my grandmother taught me, is that when you go through great despair, that's when you see hope. That's when you hold on most to hope. That's when you know hope is needed. And that's what I wanted to do with this book. I wanted to make lots of room for all of those feelings. So I spoke a lot about loneliness and despair. And then I speak about the light. And then I speak about joy. And I speak about the things you learn from reflecting in isolation. And that's what's been so fun about this book. I feel like it's been really cathartic. It's been hard to write, but it's been cathartic, and it's something I've needed because I've been so far away from my family. So I'm going to read The Dynamics of Lonely, and then I'm going to read something a little more cheerful because they're short poems.
Okay.
On a midnight walk in a forest full of stars, I reconsider the way lonely works, how it gets into the bones of children who grow to be adults with abandonment issues because of an absent parent. how it hardens the heart of people who use it to block someone out of a group, how the cruelest places use lonely as a punishment through solitary confinement, and how we spend our days watching clocks in forlorn buildings, waiting for when we can go home to the warmth of love. All this to divide us and conquer. A wolf left alone in the wild is easy prey too. This is why wolves live in packs. They know that community keeps every wolf healthier and safer, each one fulfilling a duty to the other, protecting and nurturing their young to be better. Our strength then lies in numbers. We are wildflowers, designed to weather storms and grow in places no one expects us, rising and thriving together. That's the first one. Now read the second one. So this one's called The Oak. In the poetry of existence, the oak tree stands tall. Despite the winds that try to knock it down, the grass grows again, even if it is cut every 2 weeks. The stars shine, defying their own deaths across time. The birds migrate across a sky that promises heavy storms, and the leaves shed at autumn and sprout again at spring. All of this says, if brave was easy, it would not belong in this family. It is in our DNAs, our bones. We all have it in us to be heroes.
I want to pick up on a couple of things you said there. One, the reference to the wolves and being in packs, and also the one about your comment before about being a writer and, you know, working in isolation is part of the job. One of the things that I've sort of discovered this last year was that as much as that's true, I need social interaction to feed my writing. How did you find that aspect? Was it a question of just going inwards, or did you find other ways of sort of sublimating those needs for social interaction?
You know, it's a funny thing because I think community is one of the, I talk about that in this poem, and it's so funny, but in isolation, I've learned just how important community is. And I began to realize how many communities I was a part of and how lucky I am to be part of those communities, queer communities and, you know, South Asian communities and generally communities of color. And we've all moved on to Zoom, you know, like where we have, like my friends and I do this like drink and movie night, you know, once a week, or we do like get together like once a month, like a big group of my friends, or, you know, and we do it on Zoom. But recently I went out and met a bunch of my friends in the park, you know, so I was able to meet five people I care about in the park because that's the rules. And it's all socially distanced, but I literally sat and cried for the first 5 minutes because I didn't realize, and I'm not someone who will do that, but I cried because I met people for the first time and it felt like so long that it was so overwhelming that I just burst into tears. I'm glad I wasn't alone doing that in the group because that would have been awkward, but it really did mean so much to me. And I think a part of me does that thing where I suppress. When something's taken away, I suppress my need for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only when you kind of are in a safe space to let it go that you realize what it means. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It was hard. It's been hard. And I do need that social interaction. I'm lucky I have friends to talk to, and we're lucky we've got like lots of means to talk to our friends, but the environment is different. You know how in a live event, the environment is different. You feed off the audience. It's like that.
We were talking before you all came in about Russell T Davis's Years and Years, which we all had very strong feelings about. I think it's extraordinary how prescient it was. That at the time it felt like he was taking some of the trends that were happening within British culture and just pushing them that little bit further. And then lo and behold, along comes Boris Johnson who goes, hey, I can run with that. And basically we're now way further down that road.
The one comfort I take is that we have people in our society sensitive enough to see what's coming. And if you can anticipate what's coming, then you're ready. And I think, you know, we're a smart society in the UK, but we're in a dangerous position where life is just comfortable enough for us to kind of turn away.
Yeah.
But what
absolutely.
we don't realize is that society isn't like, it's not, things are okay, and they gradually, then they collapse quickly. They don't, it's like those houses that are built near the cliffs. They're fine for like 50 years, and then like they can collapse almost overnight, if that makes sense. They can subside almost overnight, and it's like that. So I saw a question in the, interested by the description of this social way of being that's defined by class, how it's firmed up, preserved by everyone else. You might think these people may have more to lose, but the uncanny thing for description is seem to worry less about losing it. Did you ever see that spell break? What did that tell you about that psyche? Now, the funny thing is, Stephen, these people are permanently wealthy, right? Like, you have to understand that, as you, well, you know this, Stephen, when you're in a world like that, let's say that you have a drug problem. You can go to Argentina for 2-3 years and sit on a beach somewhere, well, just, you know, sit on a ranch somewhere in Argentina and dry out and just come back to London, and you've got a job in somebody's hedge fund. There's a moment after uni, it was really wild, right? So after uni, we always play football together, like, you know, the old boys have play football in West London. And so we leave uni, and I get added to this email list. You're going to come play football, Musa, because I was a good footballer at school. And I was thinking, wow, like all these email addresses, I don't recognize them. Like, it was like, some had the Gmail address, some had the, like, you know, the law firm, but a lot of these other people had this weird something Etsy, ETCIE. And I'm like, what's that? And I was like, what is it? And I Googled them, and they were all single page websites, financial professionals, financial regulators. I'm like, oh my God, they're all hedge funds. This bunch of guys from school have all gone to boarding school, and they've all got jobs in hedge funds, probably without interviews, or probably by having a couple of, like, you know, boozy lunches in London. And now they're all sorted out for life. That's a world I encountered like very rarely since I left. And if you go to that world and lean heavily into the contacts, you're not only made for life, but your kids can be made for life.
Do you think things are starting to crack though? Because I mean, was it a few years ago that the whole deal about internships, you know, like wealthy people getting, you know, jobs where you're not paid, but you get amazing experience. So then you do get a job in the best companies. It all came out, didn't it? That,
yes.
You know, it's all who you know, but also, you know, for people from backgrounds that are economically disadvantaged, how would they do those kinds of internships? Because, you know, a lot of the jobs are in London. It's very expensive to live in London. And I don't know whether that's all gone quiet, you know.
No, Elizabeth, you're right. It is changing. It is changing. Do you know why? Look at the A-levels storm this summer.
Yeah.
Because I think this was the first summer that the English middle class realized how willing the upper class was to screw them over. Until then, it had been the working class, the miners. But now it was like the English middle classes were like, oh my God, they don't care about the grades of my kids. That is a different mobilization that I saw. I think it is changing in the UK. I mean, not quick enough for my liking, but look at the royal family, for example. Look at the criticism around the Meghan Markle Harry thing, because the average person looks at that. No matter what they think of the royal families, they're thinking, what did it take to force apart those two brothers who were so close? It can't be nothing. Like, people can say, oh, Meghan's this, but they're like, no, those brothers were really close. Do we really believe? Because like Harry seems to love Meghan. It seems real. Like, do we really believe that some woman came from outside and drove them apart? No, we don't buy that, because they saw it happen with Diana. So that is changing. And here's the thing, the older that, like, you know, the Queen basically, and I hate to say it, the Queen is basically keeping that thing at its level of popularity. And I don't want to say this in a negative way, it's a very different story 20 years from now. And so I think, yeah, Elizabeth, things are definitely changing in terms of the scrutiny. And like for Boris Johnson, I don't think you get away with that 10 years from now.
Nope.
I don't think the chuckling posh boy, because the full effect of Brexit has not been seen yet. Economically, no. Like, we're going to go through a financial crash and maybe a bit of an environmental collapse, and then it's not going to be funny, because all those people are laughing and joking at you. They've got all the mortgages that your kids can't have, the jobs your kids can't have, the tax offshore that your kids have paid, that should be funding our healthcare services. 10 to 15 years from now, this is a different conversation.
Yeah, but it might even be sooner. I mean, what was amazing about last summer was how, despite the COVID laws about, we're not supposed to be protesting, everyone was out on the streets for Black Lives Matter, because it was just, with the technology now, what's fantastic is people record the news themselves. So if somebody's being killed by the police, we've all got our mobiles out, and I just think, I mean, it goes back to that point about Nikita, you talking about communities earlier, that I just think that we have got, there is community building and inter-community building through the COVID pandemic and internationally, that, that the fact that so many people have died, and, emergency workers and bus drivers, it's just been incredible that people are basically going on protests, often people that didn't used to go on protests.
That's different. That's why I have faith. Like, it's, it's funny, it's like Russell T Davies in Years and Years. I know it's an optimistic ending, but I think he was also right. He was like, what does it end with? It ends with the protest and people filming the protests and speaking out. And the thing about the English, look, like I say, the messages I've had from Etonians, I've never received messages from those people. Never like that. The level of introspection, people writing to me, this is like white, upper class Englishmen going, thank you for saying it, thank you for saying it, thank you for saying it.
There's a question here for Elizabeth from Edward. One of the most insidious things about hate crime is that the perpetrators can cleverly engineer it into not being witnessed. Did this contribute to speaking out?
That's a really good question, actually. So one of the things that I do in the fiction, and as you'll have gathered by now, I mean, my book is a novel, but it has interjections by the author, author's notes. And it's something that comes up, which is how hate crime works, is that perpetrators do engineer not being witnessed, or another aspect of it is to do with how, people like us, so ethnic minority people or gay people, quite often we're seen as sort of unreliable witnesses, even of our own experience. So for example, I mean, the classic for me that does come up in my book is when I've experienced racism in different contexts. Somebody might say, but I wouldn't call it racism. And it's like, one of the things that came out about the Macpherson report, into the murder of Stephen Lawrence, was this whole thing about actually, the person who experiences the hate crime knows about it. But yeah, I mean, to go back to Edward's question, I think perpetrators, and that goes for what we were talking about, the politics of the pandemic in the past 12 months, is that there is a clever engineering, clever in inverted commas, because it always gets found out eventually. So if you think of government contracts that have gone without tender to companies that did not know how to make PPE, and we've had nurses and doctors dying from fake PPE. So that kind of thing, I think it goes from the micro to the macros.
I think we're going to have to draw everything to a close because we're going to run out of time and get booted off soon. I'd like to thank all three of you. Thank you so much for your time and for your wonderful readings and for contributing to such a really fascinating conversation. I could talk to you all night.
Can I just thank everyone for tuning in? I want to thank everyone for tuning in because, like, obviously you could be anywhere else this evening, any other digital pursuit. So thank you so much, and just great to be among queer community, because it's something I've been missing. So thank you so much, everyone. Real pleasure.